right, here we go. Hi there, everybody. We're going to do something fun today. I have with me today Leo Greenberry, who is the owner of Handheld History, a fantastic numismatist, and somebody that I think you all should get to know a little bit. And I thought the best way to do that would be to bring him in and go over his top 5 emperors, leaders in ancient history. And I'll compare notes and I'll go over mine. And that'll be a good way for us to get to know each other. A good way, not necessarily a long form interview, but a good way to get to know a dealer in short form, so you can get to know him and hopefully buy something from him. Leo, do you want to give us a couple minutes spiel about where to find your stuff at, what you've been doing, all that kind of stuff?
Well, first off, Dean, thank you for having me on the Ancient Coin podcast. I really enjoy your show. I enjoy you and Josh. You guys have years of expertise, and you guys really are just a cross section of the community at large. I've really gone into this with my head and heart over the last year, and I've been welcomed with open arms. So I really appreciate you having me here on the show. So again, I started Handheld History this year. I collected off and on for 20 years. There were periods of dormancy. I collected other things like world currencies when I was on deployment in the military. I think that's like a natural thing us military folks do. I was in the Navy for 6 years. I did the maiden deployment on the USS George H.W. Bush during the Arab Spring in 2011.
Thank you for
So,
your service.
I tried my best to, enjoy myself my few days in port, and collecting coinage and currency has always been near and dear to my heart. It's something that I did with my father when I was a kid. Just age of 4, I found a wheat penny in my change, and 30 years later, here I am.
And so you specialize in selling ancient coins. I understand you told me right before here, and I don't want to spoil your announcement, but go ahead and let us know your new news.
Yeah, so again, thanks to the amazing support I've had in this community, my application to sell on Vcoins, have a storefront on Vcoins has been approved. And so I will be spending most of December building out my storefront. I look forward to launching, and I'll make an announcement on Facebook, which is my primary avenue right now, but I'm really excited to roll that out. I've had a lot of clamoring from repeat customers and new customers who my name has started to float around there. So they're like, "Where are all your coins?" And I always say, "I've got more. I just I don't want to like flood all the Facebook pages with all the coins I've got." So I think Vcoins will be a good start, and I'm hoping it goes well. I'm really looking forward to showcasing what I have.
We're very much rooting for you. And in the interim, though, you do have a Facebook page where people can look you up, Handheld History, and
Yes.
you post routinely about coins you have for sale. So if you're on Facebook, make sure you check it out. And then in the coming weeks, we'll start to see you on Vcoins. My recommendation always, this was given to me by the great Tyler Rossi, is advertise your coins 2 at a time on Vcoins. So you do
That makes
two
sense.
two a day,
Yes.
So you
Yeah, that way
constantly
you kind
come
of
up,
keep bumping
big
up.
bubble up to the
Yep.
top. Yep, that's my piece of advice for you for Vcoins. Okay, so congratulations. Let's get into top 5. This is a new game we're going to play, so it'll be fun. I will go into the 5. I will start at number 5. These do go in particular order. These are the 5 best leaders in history from my perspective, or at least this is my first take at it. And Leo's going to counter and come up with his own list. So I will start with number 5, and then Leo will go to his number 5, and we'll alternate back and forth. So I will start it off with my number 5, and my number 5 is Justinian. And the reason for that is Justinian is basically nearly responsible for reuniting the entire empire, kicked out the Visigoths, the Vandals, the Ostrogoths, took Italy, took North Africa, and really reclaimed a lot of the Roman Empire. He's also famous for his book of laws, the Justinian Code, the Hagia Sophia, and really kind of extending Constantine's idea of Constantinople into something even greater. He certainly did have problems. I think if you read some of his books or some of the history on him, kind of a varied take on what he was like at the end. A lot of it, you read that he was very, typical kind of dictator, very nervous about those around him, and generally his career, even though he had some real tough stumbling points like the plague, overcame it, basically reunited most of the Roman Empire, and was very successful, long leader. So that he was up against Basil II, who is behind my head here, who is always my number one, but he did not reclaim enough territory for the empire for him to make number 5. So Justinian is my number 5. Mr. Leo, what do you got for number 5?
Well, I put together I gathered my thoughts in my list, and I did not have them in a order, so I was very quickly trying to think of one. I guess I'm gonna go with Wu Zetian as my number 5.
Okay.
She is a female empress from China from the 7th century A.D. And she rose through the ranks. She started out as an imperial concubine, and I really like holistic leaders that manage to not just rule just by brute force or just wipe everybody out. Think like Genghis Khan or something. I like somebody who was able to take their power, turn it into something. Whether it was
statesman, right?
Some kind of, whether they effectively ran an administrative state like, Augustus, who completely remade the Republic in his image and in his dream. Wu Zetian did the same thing in China, and, she encouraged the strengthening of Buddhism, which, as a Buddhist, I'm a little biased there, like I'm not practicing anymore, but, I always thought that was really, really important. She strengthened her intelligence networks. She ruled smartly, and that the leaders that, that make it a long time, they rule smartly. And so, she, just like Justinian, has, her controversial marks against her. Anybody who can cling to power for 40 plus years, is going to, have a good bit of paranoia.
Yeah.
And some personality flaws. But, I think, what was it? She was married to one emperor at one point. He died, and then she ended up marrying his son, and they were all kind of passive. So she really just ran the show in China. Right. And, she strengthened the army, protected the borders, strengthened the navy, and ultimately she left China in a better place for a long time to come.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Number 5, that one I did not expect. Mine would be more traditional, and so I'm glad that we have your perspective, Leo. Thank you. My number 4, Trajan, and that is primarily because if you look at a Roman map, generally the Roman map that you'll see is the one that Trajan made, and that's pretty much universal. So victories in Mesopotamia, victories in Dacia really solidified the empire, and I would say is probably the best of the 5 good emperors. And is probably, I would say, represents almost the pinnacle of the Roman Empire at that point in time between those three emperors. And he just a very representative guy, good statesman, but very, very talented militarily. And, when I think of best emperors, the guy who made it what it is that guy. I think so. And so that's why I take Trajan at number 4. He's a builder, but also somebody who conquered and made Rome the biggest that it ever was. So Absolutely. That's my number 4. Leo,
yeah,
I mean,
4. Trajan, he walked so that, Hadrian and Antoninus Pius and all of them could run,
That's right.
And in, Trajan kind of destroyed all the enemies, and even like under it carried through even to Antoninus Pius's time, where it was just 23 years of like uninterrupted peace. So yeah, that's a very solid pick. A lot of my other people, I think you'll find. I was thinking about the common themes with the rest of my list, and my number 4 is Marcus Agrippa.
Hey,
Yeah,
okay.
so General Agrippa, a great supportive statesman of Augustus. I was joking around online. They're the definition of brotherly love, but also, Augustus loved him so much that, he said, "Hey, marry my daughter. I want you in the bloodline." But he was a very smart man. He was a behind the scenes kind of person, which is kind of like how I identify with like my everyday work. I'm the chief of staff for a member of the Pennsylvania House. My job is to make sure the things in the background are getting done. The things that she doesn't want to think about, I must think about. And I like that role.
Yeah.
So I've got a soft spot for Agrippa. But I mean, even in the action when he was the man in charge, when I think of Agrippa, I think of the Battle of Actium.
Yeah.
You know, he defeated Antony and Cleopatra's forces, and he had to understand naval tactics. And he helped achieve Augustus's vision in the reformation of the republic into the empire. That wasn't just Augustus alone, but you had two very prudent, sharp, intelligent men working together. And then Augustus was working on his stuff, but he gave Agrippa a lot of leeway to focus on his projects. And once the peace was achieved, and the stability was back, Agrippa focused on a lot of building projects, new aqueducts, improving the roads, large building projects, the original Pantheon,
Yeah.
things we think of when we think of Rome, a lot of that is due to Agrippa.
That's right.
And, I'm just blown away by the things I've learned about him. There's always more to learn in history, but I think he's a solid number four.
Yeah. And I would say that there is no Augustus without Agrippa.
Absolutely.
The Roman
Yes.
Empire would have lasted quite a bit shorter because Mark Antony was no kind of, big thinker. And really, the reformations that Augustus was able to put into place, combined with Agrippa's building, and really probably might be top three Roman generals of all time.
I could agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and just a combination, but then also very selfless. And it's funny we talked about Justinian earlier, but Belisarius to me, sort
Yes.
of the building aspect is really the same, except the story kind of changes at the end. It's a little strange,
Yeah.
but Agrippa is really the cornerstone or the backbone that helped create the Roman Empire that lasted 476 years beyond. Okay, that's a great one. I'm going to go to number three. And so to accompany your number four, Augustus, is my number three. And there's only one reason that I put him at number three, because in terms of administration and really having a plan that would last with, long term, I mean, he basically had designs on what the empire would be, and he made it into what that is. The reason he's number three is because, like you said, he is kind of only half gifted. So a superior statesman, but pretty atrocious when it comes to military. The some of it is very. It's you know, I don't want to say it's cowardly, but it just wasn't his thing, and he tried very hard to make it not a part of his thing. So
Yeah.
I think which was it, the Battle of Actium, where he took a nap
Well,
or laid
I think it
down.
was the Battle of Philippi.
Yeah, Philippi.
Yeah.
Yeah, he took a nap.
Yeah.
Couldn't be a part of it,
Yeah. He
and
was
so
just a.
yeah, he'll never be a number one to me. But in terms of, so like Napoleon is a number one, but I'm not going to put him in this list. But Napoleon is a statesman and a general,
Yes.
and that's why he would be higher up. But Augustus, obviously, there's, you think about his life story and what a crazy ride.
Absolutely. And there's no. I would argue there's nobody more iconic than Augustus when you think of imperial coinage.
Yeah,
I mean, if we're talking whatever it was, about a 90 or so emperors over, a 476-year period, Augustus had the longest reign, and he was the first. And in his, why a lot of people collect his coinage is because you really see that transition, with the portrayals of, what the moneyers put on the coinage, all the way to you get the more formulaic, emperor on one side, God on the other,
That's right.
and it's fascinating if you appreciate numismatic evolution.
Yeah.
So solid
Yeah.
number 3.
Absolutely. All right. Number 3 for you.
I decided to go with Pericles.
Okay.
Just like we were talking about, the Roman Golden Ages and the people that exemplify those times. I'm going to go with Pericles.
Interesting.
He ushered in the Athenian Golden Age. He perpetuated the values of Athenian democracy. And, without the Athenian Golden Age, who knows what influence down the line democracy would have had in later cultures. When, our listeners here think of the classic Athenian tetradrachm with the owl, that was Pericles. That was the time that he was around. He had expansionist policies during the Peloponnesian War, and we know how that went. And unfortunately, we can never really know how the end of the story played out because he died of plague. He, in my summation from what I've read, he was always deferential to the demos. He listened to the will of the voters, of the people of Athens. And I have a lot of respect for leaders who can toe that line of handling the politics while also being able to defend under arduous situations. So, ruling with an iron fist but wearing a silk glove.
Right.
So
right. That's what it
a
takes.
lot of respect to Pericles.
All right. Okay.
And the Parthenon,
Yeah.
when you think of the Parthenon, that was under his reign.
That's right. All right, so I'll go number 2, and I think we probably, well, no, actually, I don't think we have 1 or 2 in common, but 2 would be something that everybody would expect from everybody. 2 would be Alexander the Great. Obvious reasons. Again, not necessarily a great statesman, but he did have some ideas that did not survive his. I'm not sure that they would have been effective or even worked, but it seemed like he was directionally thinking about what the next stages were after kind of conquering everything. Although, obviously he probably would go west and assume that he would conquer forever. But it sounds like, based on the reading and stuff, that he did have some designs on what would come next. It just all happened so fast that he really didn't get a chance to plan for it.
Yeah.
But obviously changed the world in all the great ways, and, some negative, obviously. But really, in terms of people making a difference in the world, he's always going to be in the top 3 or top 5. I, as a coin collector, I appreciate him. If it wasn't for Hellenism and the incredible artwork, ancient coins would not be what they were or what they are to people. And certainly he was a huge proponent, like the Athenian owl. There was tons of Alexandrian coins going around to support the war effort. And so not just from a military standpoint, but just as an overall person, somebody that changed the world, I really feel like Alexander's number 2. Leo,
Yeah.
who you got?
So, and again, I think, might not have agreed on the order, but I think that my number 2 might segue into yours. But I went with Julius Caesar for number 2. Classic. He's got to be on the list. And everything. Just Caesar. I just read so many contradictions sometimes with Caesar. But again, I'm going to quiz you at the end when I give you my last one and ask you what the common thread is with all of these people. But Caesar, I mean, just the obvious stuff. He conquered so many places, and he just outlasted everybody. I mean, until he didn't.
Okay, right.
But if you understand the slow, incremental accumulation of power, you get to the end of the story by the time he becomes dictator perpetuo, and you're like, well, gosh, I mean, every other person is dead. And, like, whatever opinions you have about dictatorship, it's like, gosh, maybe he deserved it because, I mean, God must have willed it because he just got out of so many situations, so many battles that he was,
Lucky.
80% likely to lose. And he just had the most amazing Uno reverse cards I have ever seen.
Yeah.
Like some of the tactics used in these battles. And he was just he is a cheeky young guy. You know, I really love the story when he was captured as a young man by
Yeah.
pirates, you
Yeah.
know, and they wanted, I don't know, 20,000 talents or something like that. And he says, "How dare you? I am worth 50,000 talents. Ask him for 50,000. And by the way, when I get out of this, I'm going to come back and I'm going to kill you all." And they just laughed, and he laughed. And, you know, then, like, he came back and he killed him, you
That's
know, and
right.
I'm like, he is a man of his word. Like, you know, he
That's right.
really, I think his word meant a great deal to him. And you saw that borne out even after he died. And, you know, his will directed Augustus to, you know, take care of the people that I promised I would take care of,
Yeah.
you know, which is the Roman citizens and everybody that supported him. So, um, very interesting man, very polarizing man, but he was an amazing tactician, and he understood the value of supply lines.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. I would continue on, and so I'll move the camera a little bit so we have our number one ranked guy in the background here. So obviously Julius Caesar, number of reasons. You know, the thing about him is there's not one, you know, there's not one or two or three things that you could point to. It's just an overall, you know, think about the calendar. Think about
Yeah.
just the calendar. It's
Right.
different because of him. And it's not just the month, it's the way we change the days, right? Think about you know, his great victories in battle. Who is he fighting against? The same army, right? So he was as evenly matched as everyone was fighting, right? So he didn't come in with a strategic advantage or better equipment. He was fighting the same guys with the same stuff and routinely came back victorious against some of the greatest generals of all time, right? And you know, not just that, but also conquering Gaul. He was a visionary. Britain. There's just a lot of things, but you know, it's funny that you know a lot of people like to think about him in kind of relationship to what you know happens currently, right? And what is it that you know maybe the Romans can teach Americans about history and you know kind of a changing of the guard in terms of a government. I would not compare those two just because Julius Caesar was so uniquely talented that it's almost conceivable that he was given that talent for that reason, right? You can almost see it. And it obviously he pushed the line and it pushed back. But you could see that he had gifts that he wanted. He had so many plans beyond. And it's really almost like frustrating because you really feel like I wonder what he would actually would he have beaten the Parthians? Would he have, you know? I mean, there's just so many questions that, but the sheer amount of volume of things that he did in such a 56-year life, uh, just unparalleled. Again, there's so much in the world that's different because he's there, and that's really why I would consider. I mean, it's so funny. The one of the interesting parts about him is that obviously he was with Cleopatra for a long time, moved her to Rome, but he's not even like that's such a just one of the things, right? So like Mark Antony, you always talk about Cleopatra because they're together, but Julius Caesar is so important that doesn't even you don't even tie Cleopatra to him. He's too important, right? So it's just there's just a ton of different things to enjoy about him and his history. And he wrote, and we have understanding of what he wrote about, and then we have images. There's just a lot to like. But anyway, that's my number one. And for you, Leo, go ahead.
My number one. So, I agonized over Julius Caesar being number one or not, but I went with Cincinnatus.
Okay.
So probably a less popular choice, but I would like to think that Caesar saw himself somewhat at some point as a Cincinnatus. Sulla saw himself as a Cincinnatus. I think a lot of Roman statesmen who were given dictatorial powers saw themselves as Cincinnatus.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Lucius Quintius Cincinnatus was a statesman from, I believe it was the 5th century BC. There was a large fight with the Aequi tribe in mainland Italy, and he was given dictatorial powers, and he resolved the conflict in 16 days. And I think, according to legend, he put yokes on all of the captured people, to
Right,
symbolize their capture and all that. But he stepped down immediately after. He said, this is great. I could be the king. I could be the man. No thanks. I'm going to go back to being a farmer. And, he was called upon 20-ish years later and imbued with dictatorial powers again. And he resolved the issue and he said, no, thank you. This was great. I'm proud to do my service to my country, but it's time for me to go home. And I think, as an idea that has had more immediate effects on this country than I would argue maybe even the European countries. European countries, you have Kaiser, you have Tsar, like all of the Caesarian influence there. But Cincinnatus, the idea of a peaceful transfer of power and, the powers of our president is quite powerful. It is the most powerful job in the world. It is a very difficult job, but it is, always the hope that, we have a system where the president can walk away from that and go back to being a private citizen. And, it's something that we've always had, and it's something that I appreciate about our country. And, that means a lot to me. And one of George Washington's greatest heroes was Cincinnatus, and he emulated him very well. And a lot of us emulate, we think about George Washington very highly. And I always ask myself, who did George Washington look up to?
That's right.
So I would say that Cincinnatus is a low-key bigger influence on our American way of life, even though you got me on the calendar.
That's right. Well, and then what's it called? The only question you would have, I guess, is do you think that Julius Caesar would have given his power back?
I think it would have been hard at a certain point. See, I'm with Caesar, and this is pure speculation. This is just Leo Greenberry, not handheld history. I think it was a slow change over time. Think like Lincoln at the beginning of the Civil War, not saying he wants to free the slaves, and over time he has moved to want to free the slaves. Now, totally different thing with Julius Caesar. I don't think at the beginning he wanted to just be dictator perpetuo. I think that, over time he moved in that direction as a reaction to the reaction to the reaction. And that's the issue, the danger of reactions and overreactions. At some point, you might win today's battle, and then the overreaction to you winning the battle might be 10 times worse. So, it gets tricky. At some point, somebody has to yield if we're looking at history. When you're talking about division within a country, there has to be time for healing and grace and understanding one another and our differences. Unfortunately, in Caesar's time, there was one side, there was the other. There was a lot of instability and fragmentation, and Caesar felt moved. At a certain point, he had no choice. He had decided he was going to do what he was going to do when he crossed the Rubicon. He was a smart guy, and he knew that. So, if you're asking, like in 59 BC, when he became consul, I don't think he wanted to be dictator for life. But, by 48, I think that he did.
Yeah.
So, I would say that he would have just kept until he died.
I think he would have died, whether it was from epilepsy or whatever other ailments he had before he gave it back, whether he had designs on it or not. He lived kind of recklessly anyway.
I would say too, that the model for emperor may have been very different maybe it would have still been Augustus, but if Caesar had had maybe another 5 to 10 years to kind of model,
Yeah.
The imperator position in his own image, it would have been very different, and Augustus would have come in at an older age.
Yeah.
Things would have been very different, I think.
Well, Leo, thank you so much for your input. I'm glad everybody got to meet you because I enjoyed talking to you. And of course, make sure you look for Leo on Facebook and Handheld History. Check out his page and make sure to follow him. And then also look for him on Vcoins here coming up in the near future, as he will be an authorized seller. And I always recommend people start at Vcoins when they're buying coins. But Leo, thank you so much for joining. I hope you have a wonderful day.
You as well, Dean. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Leo. Okay, and now I'm going to stop